Hello. And welcome to my first live stream edition of Listen In with KNN, presented by Fox Sports Radio, 96.9 FM and 1340 AM. I am so excited to be doing this show with you all. It's a true honor and pleasure. Happy NFL Draft Day. We have a lot in store, so I brought in the big guns to help me out on today's show. Today, my special guest will be Nick Lowery. Nick Lowery should sound very familiar. He had lots of experience playing in the NFL, a 5-time Man of the Year for the Kansas City Chiefs and the New York Jets. So you all are in for a great one. Be sure to send your questions and comments in. We're going to celebrate. I'm rocking my Ravens jersey because one of my all-time favorite NFL draft memories was when Ozzie Newsome used that last pick in the first round to select none other than Lamar Jackson. And of course, the rest is history for the Baltimore Ravens. So without further ado, I am going to bring on my very special guest, Mr. Nick Lowery. Nick, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thanks so much for joining me.
Well, it's an honor, and you're in my hometown. I grew up in McLean, Virginia, went to Potomac School where Gene Upshaw's son went, and a lot of interesting people. The Kennedys went, and some really good people. And then I went to St. Albans School where Jonathan Ogden, NFL Hall went. And
talking about the Ravens, you see the shirt I'm rocking.
Well, I'm just wearing an NFLPA thing right here. So D. Smith, if you're listening, buddy.
It still counts. So exciting. Yes, I'm kind of biased. I'm from the DMV area. You are from the DMV area. So it's great to have you back because you're living out in Phoenix now, right?
In Arizona, yeah. I go to Kansas City a lot. Went to, almost half their games this past year, including the playoff games in the Super Bowl, and got to watch a magical thing happen where they just seemed to come back from ridiculous deficits. And to me, I'm really excited because that team is pretty much entirely restored. The offensive coordinator, Eric Bieniemy, we thought we'd lose. We didn't lose. So, when you watch the Patriots, one of the great achievements of Bill Belichick is he would lose his offensive and defensive coordinator every year, every other year. He would lose lots of coaches. He'd lose a number of players who wanted to get a bigger payday, and more power to them. But it made for inconsistency of the team he had to work with, and yet he found a way to win. And the cool thing now for Andy Reid is he's got pretty much the same stars. I mean, Travis Kelsey, all-NBA tight end, Tyreek Hill, who's just extraordinary, and McCole Hardman, and of course Damian Williams, who really was, and still I think was a bit of the unsung hero of the Super Bowl with that clinching touchdown. And of course, that guy we kind of remember named Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yes, and Patrick Mahomes, so much to talk about with the Chiefs, but you talked about the Patriots. I feel like everyone's talking about the Patriots now because they're looking a little different. Tom Brady now with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and then lo and behold, Gronk comes back to football and joining Tom Brady. Let's start with Gronk since that news was more recent. When you heard that Gronk was first coming back to the NFL and then was going to team up with Tom Brady once again, what were your thoughts, Nick?
Well, I think they've probably been talking about that at least once a week for the last year. And my friend Bruce Arians, who was one of our coaches with the Chiefs, coached Christian Okoye when he led the NFL in rushing. I knew a couple days beforehand that this was probably going to happen for Tom to go there, but to add Gronkowski, who without a doubt, those two are the most dynamic, crucial touchdown pair. Tight end. Of course, I'm saying this partly to get Travis Kelsey mad because when he plays with something to prove with a chip, he is the best. He's extraordinary with that guy named Patrick Mahomes. So I think it's a great thing for Tom Brady. It's a great thing for Tampa Bay. It's not a terribly bad thing for New England. They wouldn't have got him back anyway. New England's got to find a new rhythm. As you remember, they tended to do, not always, but almost always, their backup quarterbacks when Brady was not playing tended to do quite well, but this is a new era. It's going to be a big challenge. I'm sure they've got a lot of thought as to what they're doing, but they've got a bit of a hill to climb this year. And I'm feeling pretty good about the Chiefs. I think Baltimore will again be a huge challenge as well. Your team.
I know. See, we're going to be back going head to head. And I think the matchup that we got this season with Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes. And of course, we wanted those two teams to face off. But Derrick Henry happened to the Baltimore Ravens. Sorry, Ravens fans. It was not me. It was all Derrick Henry. But just the season that Lamar Jackson had, and then to go on to win an MVP. And then John Harbaugh also to win that Coach of the Year award. What do you think that talks about for this Ravens organization and just what we have to look forward to in the AFC?
Well, I was there at the Chiefs 101 banquet, which quite a few people think is the best, certainly one of the 2 or 3 best football awards banquets. And there was John Harbaugh with his brother, who was a good friend of mine and was a player back in the day in '88, first day of the strike when we or the lockout. And I've known them, and I watched Lamar Jackson really convince me more than I had before that he has a real football mind. Nobody gives him credit for that. They see the great athlete that he is, and they certainly should have seen how accurate he went from year 1 to year 2.
Right.
Extraordinary. I don't know if I've ever seen a quarterback improve that much in throwing accuracy, but he has a good football mind. He could remember, and he did this on stage at this awards banquet, situations, the exact plays. That kind of mind allows you to keep learning and improving, because what a quarterback has to do besides remembering the play is this happened last time and this is what I can expect. So his reactions in a split second, literally 1/10 of a second or 2/10 of a second, he gets the ball off rather than being sacked. The guy's rather than that opening is closed. You see a lot of quarterbacks that throw the ball a little bit slower, and the ball gets there a little bit later, and the defensive back's hand, instead of being here, is here. And now they can knock it away.
Right. And then just going with Lamar Jackson, too, a lot of questions, of course, was whether he could throw in the pocket. We all know he could run. Too many players were on the wrong end of his highlight tape. But just going back to Lamar, do you think he's done what he's needed to do to prove that he can be a long-time quarterback in the NFL?
No, he's not done that. He has proven that he is one hell of a scary opponent. And each year that he does it, he'll prove it some more. I mean, getting back to the Patriots, the thing I do respect about Bill Belichick's culture is the second they win a game, 30 minutes later in the locker room or less, they're saying, great game, got to get ready for next week. Marty Schottenheimer would say to us, midnight rule. So we could enjoy it for a couple hours, but then at midnight of Sunday night, Monday morning, we started to think about our next opponent. So always, Bill Belichick would say this, Tom Brady says this, the guys that are consistent, you always are having to prove yourself. A kicker, Justin Tucker being a great example, always has to prove himself. He's by far the best kicker I've ever seen. Although if he was playing when I would have loved to compete with him.
Oh, I would have loved that.
He's an operatic kicker, not just an operatic singer. So he's amazing. He's the real deal. But he's proven that over 10 years, as opposed to Lamar 2 years. Please. Show him consistent progress, and guess what? The games get bigger. So the second category, besides how you're playing, is are you doing this in the big games? Are you earning your team's right and your right to play in the big games? And then how did you play? Right now, we have to be honest. Tennessee kind of embarrassed and shut down whatever that offense was quite well. So he's got to answer for that, and his answer will be my answer to your question.
Yeah. And all right, we have a quick question from the fans. We got to go with them, Nick. And so now that Gronkowski has signed with the Bucs to add to the receiving core, what's the over/under for the Bucs going to the Super Bowl? Which, of course, will, by the way, just happen to be in Tampa, Nick. I'll let you go ahead and start that one.
I don't see them going to the Super Bowl this year. I think next year they'll be a threat. This year, I think they'll surprise people. I think they'll probably win 9-10 games, maybe more. Might be 11. I don't think it'll be more than that, and they'll make it to the playoffs, I think. A lot of games Tampa lost last year were because, in addition for Winston to be throwing 3 touchdown passes, he was throwing 2
interceptions. Yes.
Times often, a very high percentage, really, of his interceptions were returned for touchdowns. That's not going to happen this year, although Tampa's offensive line has got to play better. But what Tom Brady does is he gets all the phone numbers of his teammates, as he did. He talks to all of them, and you will see a collective surge in confidence. What does confidence breed? It breeds
Yeah.
consistency. It breeds being mentally on top of things in the key situations.
Right.
So Tampa will be much better, but I'm still going to lean towards Baltimore, and I think San Francisco and the Chiefs.
Oh, yeah, I know. It's going to be a good one. And I'm like you. I think, of course, we all love Tom Brady. He is the GOAT, but I think you can't just write Tampa on. I know we're all excited for them. They'll be a lot better than last year. But yeah, I'm like you. They're not going to the Super Bowl, not yet, at least. And just stay with quarterbacks. You brought up Jameis Winston. There's still questions around Cam Newton. I mean, these veteran quarterbacks that are still looking for a place to call home. Just give me your overall thoughts on that and where you think things might shift to land in their favor.
Well, first of all, I think Joe Burrow is the man. I've heard some people saying they're wondering. That guy has, first of all, the mentality. He then has the football mind. He then has a coach's mind, which I've never seen, maybe ever, at that age.
Yeah.
And then he can throw with pinpoint accuracy. Now, he did have great receivers, great offensive line, but he threw it 80%. I've never seen that. And so that guy is going to take over Cincinnati. Unfortunately, it's got to learn, as we did in '89 with Marty Schottenheimer and Carl Peterson, how to win, a winning mentality. And they've got to overcome years of mediocrity in Cincinnati, which is the biggest thing, to not let that old energy infect you. And I think Joe, I really do. They got to surround him with good people, but I think he'll do well. Now, having said that, Cam Newton has a lot to prove. He's got the right kind of chip on his shoulder, most likely, from what's happened. There are a number of teams that have some pretty mediocre quarterbacks that could do a lot worse than have on their own.
Exactly. Look, there's some bad quarterbacks in the NFL. We just have to be honest. And Cam Newton, I still think he is a good quarterback that can find a home in the NFL. So excited to see what happens next. And Mike Durton decided to give us another quick question. I don't think Brady will get sacked no more than 5 times this season. Your thoughts?
My thoughts are that he's in Tampa, guys. So, and Bill Belichick, another part of what he does so well is coaching the little details. And then, of course, Tom Brady, to give him credit, knows how to step up a little bit like Len Dawson, the Chiefs quarterback, or Bob Greasy, a step here, a step there. Not really agile people, but they knew how to step away from the pressure. So he won't be sacked nearly as much as Jameis Winston was, but he's going to be sacked twice as much as that. I mean, I think at least 10 sacks this year. And that's what teams have learned. With the older Tom Brady, the version that is now, he does not know what quarterback, what human being likes to be hit. So that's what teams are going to aim to do. That's exactly what Michael Strahan, my buddy, did in the Super Bowl to beat the unbeaten Patriots. How many years ago was that? About 10 years ago.
That was a while ago now. Yeah. And just great, like you said. And I think we all know Tom Brady, and especially him under pressure, the numbers are different. And like you said, nobody wants that. Nobody wants to get hit. So again, something we have to follow. Now, I want to go back to, we talked about Baltimore. Nick, we had the DMV route. So of course we have to talk about Washington. This is a DC-based show. Washington Redskins, a lot of expectations. I know you're putting your head down. All we're asking for, Nick, win more than 3 games. I'm at least asking to hopefully get at least close to the 500 mark, but they have that number 2 pick in the NFL draft. Give me your thoughts on what you like to see Washington.
Well, sometimes bad teams will continue to make bad choices. I think they may go after the pass rusher, the top pass rusher in the draft. But I mean, Tua Tagovailoa, yes, the hip is a big issue. For some, he could play 20 years, which I think is probably what's going to happen. The leadership he brings. There's a culture where, what was it, a half-filled stadium at best?
$4 tickets on StubHub at one point.
And that's when you just get so disappointed so many times you just stop showing up. So there is a need for a huge makeover. I think there'll be some juice with a new coach, but it really has to be the commitment to get the players. Young players paid more money than they ever dreamt of. They still have to perform, and there hasn't been that culture of real commitment. And real commitment is winning. Real commitment is hard work, not giving up in the fourth quarter. And the fans just felt that there really wasn't that energy. Right. So they're going to have to win it back. We turned it around in Kansas City. We had that in Kansas City in '88. And in 1 year with Marty Schottenheimer, literally training camp, we were different. So I see that with Tampa Bay. I see that turnaround. I'd like to see it in my hometown.
We would love to see it too. I'm tired of seeing so many opposing fans at the stadium. DC's been in a drought, and talking about just DC and the Washington Redskins.
Well, not the Nationals.
Not the Nationals, not the Mystics. I mean, literally, we're just waiting for the Wizards and Redskins to catch up. That's all we ask. Basketball and football, please. But going back to the Redskins, there have been a lot of questions around Dwayne Haskins and if he is the quarterback of the future for the Washington Redskins. I see your face turning. I'm not sure which way you're going, but do you believe Dwayne Haskins can get the job done?
I think he's a good quarterback. There is so much that can go wrong and some things that can go right. You know, you think about Jim Plunkett. I think about Todd Blackledge in Kansas City, Jim Plunkett in New England. If you're with a losing franchise, particularly that doesn't give you time to throw, I don't care how good you are. Even Joe Montana at the peak of his career, everybody remembers when Leonard Marshall and a guy named, what was his name again? LT.
Yep.
Him up. So if he gets time to throw, he'll be at the very least a good quarterback for Washington, and they can win 8 games in this coming year. Do I see him in the same category as Tua? No. Do I see him in the same category as Joe Burrow? No.
Right. So there's still questions. I think Dwayne Haskins has a lot to prove. I think that's why we've been seeing, I think, a stronger commitment from him this offseason, because I think he knows there's a lot of questions around him. And just staying with Washington, this whole Trent Williams situation, Nick. So many questions surrounding it. What to do with Trent Williams? If you were the Washington Redskins and you had this opportunity to possibly trade him, release him, what are you thinking, Nick?
I think when you're a new coach, I remember this with Pete Carroll with the New York Jets, who was fired at the end of his first year. And we know how good a coach Pete Carroll was then and certainly is now, which still boggles my mind. But there were a couple players on that team that were, psychologically damaged from the years of losing and maybe feeling betrayed from contract negotiations. Whatever that is, you've got to learn to unscramble that in your head, your emotional complex, and be focused and committed to the team. If this new head coach doesn't feel he's getting that, he has to trade him, because those players then become a poison to the new culture. You're then allowing the old bad energy to continue. So the other part of it is, the true part of it is, every player from kicker to quarterback, defensive end, you name it, you have to perform, get it done. Stop talking about it. Stop showing up, for one practice or one game. Have one great game. Don't, by the way, please don't celebrate after you had one sack or
no selfies with fans.
You won the Super Bowl. As Marcus Allen, my teammate for a couple of years, would say, act like you've been there. And that's where you begin to win.
No truer words have been spoken. And now I don't want people to think I'm bashing the Redskins. So we're going to get on a more positive for the Washington Redskins. And again, I want to go back to your roots here growing up in the DMV. Just give me your favorite overall memory of being a Washington Redskins fan, Nick.
Well, favorite memory is kicking 4 field goals against the Washington Redskins. And the longest field goal in the history, the longest field goal in the history of the NFL in the first quarter. Just inside 59 yards in RFK Stadium. I think that's the longest field goal ever at RFK. My Chiefs are up 12-0 against the Super Bowl champion Washington Redskins of 1983. And then a guy named John Riggins runs for 135 yards in the second half, and we lose 31-12. But so my friends and family were excited because I had a great game and the Redskins won. The other great story is I kicked 2 field goals for the Redskins in 1979. When Mark Mosley had a pulled thigh, they wanted to rest it. And Mark Mosley, to me, boy, what he did for the kicking position and that legendary MVP year. So I got to kick a couple of field goals with good old Joe Theismann, my friend Holding.
Yeah.
And we went to Atlanta. I remember waiting at Dulles Airport with Darren Talbert. And I was wearing I didn't have a lot of choices of clothes back then right out of college. So I'm wearing my little kind of trench coat, and he starts, Darren Talbert, who was a real character, if you look back to the George Allen years, he starts calling me Foggy Bottom like I'm a secret agent. I'm to Atlanta and kick a field goal, miss an extra point. First time I'd missed an extra point, never missed an extra point in college because I was learning to kick without a tee. And then the next week, I go to St. Albans on a Friday. This is the memory. On a Friday at St. Albans, the tennis courts there. and a guy's running out. I've just been working out for 2 hours. It's 99 degrees. It's 90% humidity. I've weightlifted. I've kicked. I've done some running. And this guy runs out on the field from the tennis courts and said, Bobby Beathard's calling and wants you to kick for the Redskins tonight.
Yeah. Wow.
So I drive back to McLean, take a shower, drive down to the to RFK Stadium without a contract. I walk into the locker room, and Joe Lavender, one of our very good defensive backs, goes, "Man, this guy has got it down. We practice all week, and he just shows up for the game." And I sign my contract. I went on the field. There's Joe Theismann, and he holds for me. I make a field goal again. I miss another extra point. So now this is in the context of staying with it for everybody watching. You know, mistakes, you can learn from them and become better. I went on to have not only the highest field goal percentage in NFL history when I retired, but the highest extra point percentage in NFL history when I retired.
Look at that. Wow.
But at that point, it wasn't looking that way. And I'm running towards the dugout at the end of the game. It's the fourth preseason game of that year, 1979. And I'm seeing these guys with Redskins jerseys on. I'm wearing number 2, and they're waving at me with a smile. I'm going, "Hey, great, this is cool." And as I go under the dugout, I'm looking at them. They're looking at me. They go, "Lowery, you suck." That's one of my favorite, very special memories. But going back to before that, Sonny Jurgensen, Bobby Mitchell, Charlie Taylor, Larry Brown, Myron Patios, all those characters on George Allen's teams. But before that, Sonny Jurgensen, I still think one of the most underrated quarterbacks of all time. So, you know, just phenomenal memories. Mike Bass, Chris Handberger, guys that were just, you know, great players. You know, so even when your team doesn't win, you find the players that you love that seem to come through much more often than not.
Oh, good memories. You're taking us back and staying with that, taking us back. RFK Stadium. I always love talking with former players about their favorite memories there. Of course, now RFK Stadium no longer home to DC United. Of course, the Redskins don't play there. They're up at FedEx Field. But just talk about the importance of FedEx Field in a historic sense and what it means for Washington, DC and Washington Redskins fans.
Well, you just said FedEx Field. If I were the Redskins, and they're not going to do this, if I moved the Redskins right now, to RFK Stadium and spent $30 million on just a quick update, the Redskins would win 3 more games every single year because that's a place that feels like home. And FedEx Field doesn't have that feeling. You know, it's I'm not saying it's the worst stadium. It just doesn't have that feeling. It's not that special stadium. And I noticed it in New York, playing for the Jets, playing in the same stadium with the Giants. It didn't feel like our home field. It wasn't our protective little hut, you know, our foxhole. It was not ours. And that matters a lot. So I think if the Jets had rethought it, I would have told them, keep the old stadium, let the Giants have the new one, and just update the old stadium so it's your stadium, the Jet Stadium. And I think some of this bad energy and karma, you see some weird things happen to the Jets in those stadiums where they're in the Meadowlands.
Hey, look, you said it first. You said it best. And just staying with your background, Nick, of course, I think you have one of the most interesting stories getting into the NFL, and you kind of touched on it earlier. But for those that don't know your full story, talk about that process and that path to get ready to play in the NFL, of course, as we're right on the eve of draft, right? It's coming up in a couple hours. So share your story and your background.
Well, you know, first of all, St. Albans School, Potomac School. Before that, I kicked my first field goal against Landon, a spiraling 32-yarder. And then my last field goal in high school was in the last 2 seconds of the game. And for those that are watching, Brooks Clark and Randy Smith and Evan Vai, who would go on to be senator from Indiana, was the right tackle on that field goal team. And my buddy Powers and Howe and all those guys from that team. That's a wonderful memory because we're running on the field down 7-6 with 2 seconds left. Actually, it's counting down 20 seconds, no timeouts, in the mud. It had been raining the whole game, and I kick a 43-yarder right through. The ball goes through the uprights, literally like a Hollywood movie with no time left. And the Landon fans, who were going to win the league championship, the IAC championship, were running on the field because no kicker hits that even in the NFL in those conditions, not too often. And And then suddenly about 5 seconds later, all the St. Albans fans run on. So that's a great memory. But that gave me the sense that maybe I had potential. I was recruited by Charlie Gogolak, who played for the Redskins as a kid. Princeton, almost went to Princeton, got into Princeton, went to Dartmouth. And it's harder making it in the NFL in one way, coming from the Ivy League, because your emphasis is different. You're not playing in front of 80,000. You're not really a professional. And believe me, those big teams now, they've got more money to spend on their players in the locker rooms and the facilities than NFL teams do. And so when you're with the big program teams, the transition to the NFL is not quite so abrupt. But I figured if I could make my kicks there, eventually I'd make it. Well, it took 2 years. My third year, I beat out the greatest kicker in the history of the game, my idol growing up, Jan Stenerud, and shatter all of his records. I mean, he had a 60% percentage at Arrowhead Stadium. I was 85%. He had, I won't go into it, but just it was really fun to not only beat him out and compete with him, which a lot of people don't know, head-to-head every day, but then break his records. So going back to that attitude, what really helped was being cut, because it made me humble enough to not take it for granted, to always work to get better. Walter Payton running that hill. Of course, Jerry Rice running his hill. And, let me just share this. The thing that it taught me was how important to love practice, to love preparation, so that every game you've rehearsed 1,000 times the week before.
Right.
And so I looked at a guy named Joe Montana, who came to our team with the Chiefs in 1993, and I knew he'd be good in games, Kelsey, but I didn't realize how good he was in practice. I mean, this guy in practice wouldn't just throw it kind of on the mark. Every single pass was dead on.
It's perfect,
like a symphony conductor, like James Levine in the Metropolitan Opera. I mean, just incredible. So it taught me a lot. I already knew that, but it just reconfirmed that the great ones are great, not just because they take this special greatness pill before a game, but because they've done the hard work and they know there's a feeling, a kinesthetic feeling as you're working out, as you're preparing during the week. Everything I'm doing right now, if I stay focused, will make me much more confident and ready in the game. The great players get that. Patrick Mahomes has that. That's why he's so darn good. And he infects the team around him with that same spirit. So watch for the Chiefs this year. There are always going to be some drama if we get to play, of course. I hope we get in stadiums with a few people, so that might be something to talk about as well.
And then we're talking about the Chiefs. We talked about Patrick Mahomes. I think what many are saying is soon, and I'm sure Lee Steinberg is thinking this, but it's going to be time to show Patrick Mahomes the real money. So when we think about that, Patrick Mahomes possibly has the potential to become the highest paid player in the NFL. What does that say about Patrick Mahomes and just what he's done in such a short time in the NFL?
Well, he's the most exciting quarterback I've ever seen, ever, period. And I'm Lee Steinberg was my agent. He's Patrick's agent. I watched the games with Randy Mahomes and Patrick Mahomes Sr. Quite often. And it says a lot, but it's also not a big surprise to me because of who he is. But what's more telling than all that is saying the things that echo Tom Brady, frankly, earlier in his career, most of his career, which is I'll take a little less if it means we can keep this team together, if it means we can have the players we need. And that's what he said. So I wouldn't be surprised if he has the chance to force the hand of the Chiefs with a larger salary cap and go for, $45 million a year.
Wow.
And then say, listen, I'll take 35 because it means we're going to have all these other people still with us. And of course, 35 million isn't too bad.
Not bad at all. I'll take it. You take it, Nick. And staying with quarterbacks who are looking to get paid, another question, we're going to head out to Dallas. Dak Prescott. So many questions also surrounding Dak.
Why do they spend so much time about him, though? I feel like it's a double standard. I mean, I know that Redskins fans like to dump, maybe it's well-deserved, like to dump on the Cowboys. Haven't been in the playoffs in a long time. But Dak is a good player. And I don't understand why they're worried so much about what they're going to pay him. I mean, they spend more time on Dak than on Patrick Mahomes. And I think that's really unfair. By the way, same thing again. The quarterback has to have time to throw and people to throw to. Look what happened I can't think of his name right now. Their top wide receiver from the Raiders. The Dallas Cowboys top receiver, Amari Cooper.
Amari Cooper, yes.
Yeah, he made it night and day when finally all Dak obviously needed was one more threat that was significant. He runs pretty disciplined routes as well. They're saying that he maybe isn't quite as good against the great defensive backs, but I think Amari Cooper is, for my mind, still pretty darn good. Yeah. So get him one more person, get him a dynamic, younger tight end, and have a decent running attack, which they seem to have. But it's tough. You've got to fight through the noise of all the expectations and all the big Texas talk about how great you are. Stay humble in Dallas. Do your version of New England's humility and shut up and just get it done. And then celebrate when you're holding the trophy. That's when
you celebrate. Just wait on it. Completely agree. And I want to say,
have fun.
Right. Responsible fun.
Stay focused.
Yes, completely. And then I want to stay on quarterbacks with you. And of course, the NFL draft. We're all talking about Joe Burrow, but there are other quarterbacks in this draft, I promise. So outside of Joe Burrow, who do you think we will see next get drafted? We talked about Tua, but outside of those two, who do you see next getting drafted possibly in this first round of the NFL draft?
I wish I was an expert on the others. There's one that begins with J, so I'm going to make it obvious.
Love? Is it Jordan Love?
I'm not really sure. I'm going to plead total ignorance, not pretend that I really know beyond those two. But there are really more than quarterbacks. There are a lot of great wide receivers.
Yeah.
And, receivers in this game with the rules the way it is make a huge difference. Tyreek Hill made a huge difference, but then we got another speedster in McCole Hardman. And then we also have kept Sammy. And so now we've got, 4 targets plus Damian Williams coming out of the backfield. So, when you add one receiver to a team that doesn't have much, then you go to 2. All those things change because receivers today have a chance today. And I think the breed of receivers is the best I've ever seen.
Wow. Yeah. And I agree. I think this draft class of wide receivers is magnificent. I would be very happy if I'm a team looking for a wide receiver in this draft. And I know Jerry Jeudy is one that is getting a lot of attention, but I know there are questions right now. We talked about Tua's injury. Jerry Jeudy, we're talking about is his knee and some of that undisclosed information that came out. And if he can still be dynamic in the NFL.
Yeah, well, his hip it's a scary thing because to have it that early, and it's the kind of thing where you could get injured a lot or never get injured. He has had a number of ankle sprains and some other injuries, but my intuition is he's going to be worth it. His character, et cetera, and he's another Lee Steinberg client as well.
Look at that. Lee just gets them all, right? It makes sense, right? One of the best agents to ever do it. And now, Nick, I want to go back to you. Being a kicker in the NFL, I feel like we all talk about all these other positions and stuff, but being a kicker and going into something like the NFL draft and knowing you want to get to that next level, take us through that mindset and what's that like for them?
Well, it's going to be different tonight and tomorrow. But as far as bucket list things go, to know that the game gets back where we can safely have crowds, that's much more important than this one moment, this bucket list event. Mm-hmm. But, if I had to do it over again, and if I'd had an even better college career and I wasn't so far away up at Dartmouth College up in New Hampshire, I would have wanted to have my mom and dad with me. I wasn't drafted. I was signed by the New York Jets. The Cleveland Browns came up and tried to sign me, and I just felt like they already had Don Cockcroft, and I felt like I had a chance. Almost made it that first year, and each time I got a little bit better. But it is a special time. Right. It's not the end of the world if it doesn't happen. You're going to have that time. You can still spend it with your parents. It's just not going to be on the big stage. But once again, you've got to get clear on what your priorities are. Is it that the real stage is the locker room, how I treat my teammates, the practice field, how I am focused when it really matters, and how I do the hard work to overcome my inconsistencies, and most importantly, the real stage of the game field, getting it done. The rest of the stuff, it's fun, but there are so many with social media today. There are going to be 1,000 other opportunities to, even stage the draft thing in the normal set and make your own video like it actually happened.
It's true, because I think this virtual draft idea, we're still grasping our minds around, and we'll see how good it goes. I'm watching the WNBA draft, I think there was a lot to learn for this NFL draft in ways that it could be improved, though I thought the WNBA draft went very well for a virtual draft. But I think these players, first off, having 10 people in your house and having to select those. And I know Chase Young here was talking about having like a drive-by thing where people come up and he comes outside and says hi to them and having a projector screen outside. But do you think they're still getting that full NFL draft experience? Because remember, Nick, they're supposed to be in Vegas on boats. Like what a change.
They're not. But you'll also see, as you saw with John Riggins and you saw with some of the colorful Redskins over the past, or some of the colorful Baltimore Ravens of the past, there's some that have that sort of dramatic personality, and they're creative and they find a way to have some fun with it and turn it into a party. The problem is now it has to be a social distance party. I'm predicting right now that there will be so many non-social distance shots at the draft of players way too close to the people. On the other hand, maybe they've already been with them for the last 6, 7, 8 weeks anyway.
True. Who knows? And if you're a player, let's have a little fun with it. If you're a player, you're about to get drafted at home. Are you still going for that fancy suit? Are you just going to be in your regular comfy clothes and your sweats and jeans and not making as big of a deal since you're not actually on the actual stage?
Yeah, if I'm in the top 10 picks, maybe even in the first round, I'll probably be dressed up. Yeah. The other guys, I think it's fine to have a little fun with how you choose to dress. I think wearing a bathing suit or a thong probably wouldn't work.
Please no.
But you can come up with something fun that maybe celebrates the team that you're coming from. I think that's your last chance to honor your college.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's your family, and that's a beautiful thing. One of the things, by the way, about Lee Steinberg that's so great is he was the first first agent to say you owe it to give back, to thank the coaches and the mentors and the people, the family that helped you be successful. I think that's a really neat moment for you to, for those of players that might be watching this now, make this the time to thank your family, your mom and dad in particular, your coaches. Have them with you, because that will be a memory you will never lose. I mean, I remember when I kicked the game-winning field goal in the '82 Pro Bowl. Yes, I'm that old. And there were 30 cameras in the locker room. Yeah. And it was exciting. It's wonderful. Steve Largent was holding. I got hugged by Jack Lambert. We had
nice.
We had 17 Hall of Famers on that team. Ted Hendricks.
Wow.
Dan Fouts leading us down the field. But when the locker room emptied, I felt empty. And I realized I got one friend here, Bob Grubb, who was our Pro Bowl punter for the Chiefs. But then I don't have my family, my friends. So I resolved, and I think it's really important. These are the times when you celebrate the people will always love you and have always been there for you. That doesn't mean you can add to that, but make sure you take care of those. Don't just take care of the homies that make you out of guilt. Do it to the ones that are happy for you when you're successful, no matter what, and don't expect things in return, just your love. That's what you celebrate that. And that will be a memory you will cherish. You can have it on DVD, whatever. But when your parents pass, you'll still have that memory of sharing that, because they're going to remember all of those practices, those injuries, those losses, those humiliations that they helped you through. So you kept persisting to be great.
Yeah. I mean, they were there for you before you became this big star. They saw all the work that you put in, and I love that.
No one really knows, right? And yet they kept investing their love and time in you.
Right. And those are the people that will be there for you no matter what.
And you know what?
That's such a powerful message.
Sorry to interrupt you, Kelsey.
No, you're good.
I am filled now with the mentors I had. Dick Johnson was my mentor. He kept telling me it's not how many times you fall down, because I was rejected by 8 teams 11 times. It's how many times you get up. So Dick Johnson in heaven, I love you. Gary Gardner, our coach at St. Albans, he's still there living in Montgomery Village. And Susan Gardner, if you're hearing this, I love you. You were my mentors. You helped me be better as a human being. That's what I remember about Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C., for all the bad press, you have so many people that appreciate service and leadership and contribution, and then they take their time, maybe when they're a little bit older and they can get away from their career a little bit, to put that love and that character into the next generation. And Cannon Martin, the headmaster at St. Albans, it was all about character, because character, we were called the Bulldogs, which is a great analogy. Being the bulldog and sticking with it when all the chips are down, you just keep working your way until it happens. And that's God's timing. We do our work and then let God take care of the rest.
Well said. Well said. And like you said, just having all of those mentors and people that invest in you. No one would be anywhere that they are without the help of others. And so I love that message. And I want to thank all my mentors. You have me emotional now, Nick, and so many people that have helped me to be where I am today. And just going off of that, Nick, something, I don't know if everyone knows this about you, but you do so much in the community. And I want to talk about your community work because, you have truly been a champion on and off the field. So first off, let's talk about you being president of the Nick Lowery Youth Foundation. Talk about why you started that and some of the initiatives that your program has.
If Fred Burfel was the president of the Nick Lowery Foundation, it would be kind of strange. So, but I just this work. I started in Kansas City when I realized that I'd actually given up a job, Kelsey, working for Senator Bob Packwood, thinking I was never going to play in the NFL. And then suddenly I get a call from the Chiefs, and I hang up on the guy politely, but then I go, Jim Schaaf, general manager, what am I going to do? I called Dick Johnson, and he said, Nick, you're always going to wonder. So I had to trace his phone number back to where he was in Research Hospital, where he'd had back surgery, and they signed me. So then I give up a job. My dad was very senior CIA. My next door neighbor spent his life devoted to this country. Byron Whizzer White, Supreme Court Justice, amazing football player, led the NFL in rushing.
Yeah.
So I was really incredibly blessed that way. But what became obvious was after the strike year in '82, I felt like I had to do something and start something. And that's where I linked up with Lee Steinberg and started Kick with Nick for cerebral palsy, which was modeled after Rolf Benerska, who was NFL Man of the Year, by the way, a couple years earlier, who had Kicks for Critters. His father ran the Endangered Species Program at San Diego Zoo. And every kick that Rolf made, money went to that program and people donated. So I modeled that. We raised $1 million for cerebral palsy. My Aunt Margaret Lowery, significant cerebral palsy, overcame that. Her whole life was being an overcomer. Is that the best thing of all, to become an overcomer for life? And she taught herself to type, became a professional writer. She was Utah Citizen of the Year when she was 8. I wanted to honor her, and every year we'd have a new cerebral palsy all-star, Lysadra Craddock, Josh Rudder, Joni Reiser, and they'd grow every year in our posters. And that taught me what it felt like to stay grounded. That '82 Pro Bowl was about, hey, wait a minute. Remember that you share your success and how that builds a life after football and beyond football. And so that's how I got started. And then I made a jump because I noticed so much going on with drugs in this country in the mid and late '80s and the gangs. I worked in the Reagan Drug Abuse Policy Office just to learn about the drug issue, not just say no, but just those issues. And actually today, a lot of my work is on CBD, which is not marijuana, and what it does with all sorts of really famous people, some of whom I can't tell you. We do send some to Randy Mahomes, Patrick Mahomes' mother. We've had Eric Dickerson on our stage at the Believe conference talk about how much it's helped. So, but that year cemented for me that I can do more. And so then I worked the next year for H.W. Bush on the Points of Life Foundation, because that idea was our greatest resource, which is absolutely where we are right now as a country, is our ability to stay connected to each other, to channel our God-given gifts, to share them with everyone we can, and to polish that, because that polished instrument is what we take with us for our whole lives and only gets bigger and only gets better. So a couple years later, I'm launching AmeriCorps with Rick Allen and my buddy Rob Gordon and the incredible team at the Office of National Service in the White House for Bill Clinton. And all that was also give kids, Kelsey, give kids a chance at an early age to make a difference. they're never the same. They absolutely crave making a difference. And now Champions for the Homeless, I'm shooting forward, but Champions for the Homeless, I have 20 NFL players that come every year.
Nice.
A year, and their kids are the ones that make them keep coming back because they
Aww.
formed by an experience at the age of 9 and 12 and 15 with their power, their benign power to help an adult, a scary looking adult who's actually a caring, maybe hurting human being. Native Vision, we started that with Johns Hopkins, speaking of Baltimore, Johns Hopkins Center for American Indian Health with Allison Barlow and Matu Santosham. So shout out to them. That program, Native Vision, was on Oprah as the best new program, a life skills program. And
congratulations.
Each of these are groups that simply need a little bit more attention, a little bit more light. They're in the shadows of the world. So that's what we're doing actually this week now is we're providing these tests, these COVID-19 rapid antibody tests for the homeless at St. Vincent de Paul's shelter that I've worked with for 14 years. So all of these things feed off each other. They feed your skill sets to get over your ego, which us athletes, I'll speak for myself, have to make that transition to the sublime spiritual gifts that stay with us forever. And you get better. You just get better at it. You get better at telling the message. You get better at people wanting to work with you. Of course, a lot of that revolves around being thankful. So I am really blessed that I did have Cannon Martin, Johnson, Gary Gardner, Mrs. King at Potomac School, my parents, Sidney Lowery, my mother, Hazel Lowery, who was a teacher at Potomac. And, I'll never forget waiting between innings, pitching for St. Albans, and then going out on the mound. And there's my dad in the stands. And I hadn't heard him yelling or screaming or anything. He just quietly was sitting there. So those are those little things that go into where we are now, that legacy that is the gift that the NFL brings, this legacy to live this dream and then help others find their own dreams, which may not be on the football field, but all of those football players and all of us can help someone every single day.
Wow. And I love that message. And I think especially playing in the NFL and getting that platform, you have so many people look up to you. You serve as a role model. So many kids want to be like you. And I feel like that's a question, Nick, honestly, that I ask so many athletes. And I always say, are athletes role models? And I'm curious to hear your answer to that question.
Well, first of all, the real story is Charles Barkley lives about half a mile from me here. And we run into each other several times a year. And then we talk about the world, and I turn the microphone on, if you will, and Charles we wax eloquent about all the things going on. That ad was actually supposed to be a minute. And in that minute ad versus the 30-second ad, he goes, listen, the role models need to be your parents. How can some guy you've never met or maybe met once or twice and seen him on TV, how can some guy be your role model? So that's really what he meant. Because I think if you follow Charles, he's Charles. So he's had kids, and he has the talent for making them extra colorful. But he also is the kindest, most gentle, and diplomatic guy. He really, when people call him Sir Charles, is because there's a certain nobility about Charles Barkley, growing up from Alabama and Auburn grad. And so we are role models. You're damn right we are. And we are way spoiled. The salaries. My salary my rookie year was $32,000.
Wow.
And I was happy for that. Salaries today for some will be $32 million. For many, the average salary with the new collective bargaining agreement, I want to shout out to DeMaurice Smith and Andre Collins and those guys there. I think they did a great job, frankly. There would never have been, anybody unanimously liking it. I think salaries will continue to explode from $2 million to now close to $3 million, which will be up to $5 million in just 3-4 years per player. And so you're so blessed. So it's really important to remember that.
Yeah. Ooh, well said, Nick. And then I want to go back to a question from the fans, since my show is only online because of the people. So Anton Smith, should the Hall of Fame select more special team players? Curious to hear your thoughts on this one, Nick.
Well, I'm a little biased, Antoine.
Of course.
The answer is, of course. I think I deserve to be in there. When I retired, I was the most accurate kicker in NFL history. I had the most field goals in NFL history. I had the most 50-yarders in NFL history. And yes, we hadn't been a great team in the 80s, but I was 38 for 40 in the fourth quarter for a large part of those playoff years for the Chiefs. And so I think I was 86% in the early 90s, and I was Sports Illustrated's second-team kicker, even though I stopped playing in 96, and I was the Sports Illustrated NFL kicker of the decade for the 80s. So, yeah, I think I believe it and deserve it. I think that there should be more. I think there should be just automatically one kicker every other year or every 3 years, and one special teams player of some kind every 2 years at the very least.
Nice. And so let me ask you this then as a follow-up. Other than yourself, what other special team player that's not in the Hall of Fame would you put into the Hall of Fame?
Steve Tasker. Steve Tasker, who was on my coverage team in the 91 and 93 Pro Bowls when I kicked the game winner. And he would run down and make the tackle almost every play. He was extraordinary. He would glide over these other Pro Bowlers and make them look like fools. So Steve Tasker, absolutely the quintessential special teams player, a product of Marv Levy, my coach, who gave Mark a break when he was with the Chiefs and then went on to being the Hall of Fame coach for the Buffalo Bills.
Nice. All right, we're going to stick with having fun with it. I want to go back to DC, Nick. So I want to ask you, I think you like to eat like me. DC is known for our good food scenes. When you come back to DC, any favorite restaurants or places that you'll come back and visit?
You know, I really don't go to the fine restaurants when I'm back. I tend to just stay, being blessed to see my twin sister, Annie Meza, and Scott Meza. For those listening, tell Scott I said hello. Scott was my best friend in 8th and 9th grade at Potomac. And Annie's won a couple Emmys and won an Emmy and nominated twice in film editing. And see her, see our friends from Potomac School, very, very tight-knit group, and my friends from St. Albans. But I really don't do a lot of that going to the big restaurants. I stay around McLean. I may go to a couple of the Tyson's corner restaurants, which is down towards my sister lives in Vienna. But not really a big time partier. Because I don't really get time to come back for 3 and 4, 5, 6 days. And we have a nice place out in Edinburgh, which is a nice escape for Annie and Scott, and right on the Shenandoah River.
Nice. Ooh, nice. Talk about nice views. I'm a little jealous, Nick.
You can come out sometime.
I know. I'll have to. It makes it easier to come back home. And then also just staying on you, another fun fact, you got to grow up next to a Supreme Court justice. Is that right, Nick?
Yeah.
And talk about that.
You know, that's getting back to that thing about mentors, who you surround yourself with in your private life, who you choose to spend your love life with, and in your business life. I mean, your teammates in life, that's everything. They either bring out and help refine and encourage and define and focus your best qualities, or they distract and they suck that energy. So here's Byron White, who's at the top of the list. He's a quiet guy, man of few words, swing vote on the Supreme Court, former number 2 at the Department of Justice under Bobby Kennedy, actually commandeered the school buses with the U.S. Marshals, which he was in charge of at the Department of Justice to protect the Selma civil rights marchers. And then he becomes the Supreme Court Justice for 31 years, and my next door neighbor. And then three doors down, a few years later, Justice Anthony Kennedy moved in, and he still lives on Hampshire Road. And then Justice Scalia was 8 doors down, and then Justice Rehnquist. I was friends with Janet Rehnquist, so salute to Janet Rehnquist, who's an attorney, and Jim Rehnquist, who was an awesome basketball player at Langley High School. So we had Supreme Court justices everywhere. We had role models like that. But Byron White, I mean, think about this. Number 1 at the University of Colorado, should have won the Heisman. I think he led the nation in scoring. He had a close to a 400 batting average, something like that in baseball. He was captain of the NIT championship team, or one of the best teams in the NIT in basketball in college.
Yeah.
And the same year, after getting a Rhodes Scholarship, the same year he finished number 1 at Yale Law School. He led the National Football League in rushing. And he did that in 3 years. He did that for both the Pittsburgh Steelers with the Rooney family, received the largest bonus they'd ever given at that time, and then for the Detroit Lions. So Detroit fans, there were some great running backs back there besides Gary. others. And
yeah.
you know, he didn't talk a lot, but when he did, you listened. I played basketball with him on our little basketball court in the driveway with his daughter, Nancy White. Shout out to Nancy, who's now Nancy Lippy, who was co-Stanford Athlete of the Year with James Lofton, future receiver and incredible track star at Stanford. And Nancy and my two twin brothers, who were 6'5" and 6'2", played me and Justice White in his dress shoes and his white Supreme Court shirt without his tie. And in a bloody battle, we beat them. And the next day, because there were no complaints with Justice White, he was not a complaint.
Sure.
On crutches the next day, getting into the limo they had to pick him up. So, but just an extraordinary man, a wonderful family, and just an example that says I can do more. I can aspire to more. And his advice to me was, when you're playing, because I had this chance, as I told you, to work, and it was a legislative aide in the U.S. Senate for Senator John Chafee, R.I.P., amazing war hero in the Korean War, and his wife Jeannie, who just passed, my mother's very best friend. I got to work there, but he said, you know, if you want to do both, then your off seasons, you need to do as many different things as you can. And that's also what Bill Bradley said. You know, he worked in Harlem and teaching. He worked a number of different things. Keep that perspective. Take advantage of that flexibility that so few people have to explore the world. And then you know what you really care about and what you're really good at.
I love that. I love that. And then just staying on the DMV, Kevin Durant, a new documentary coming out on PG County basketball called In the Water. You're obviously familiar with PG County basketball, being from the area. I'm super excited for this. And I think there you go. I mean, DeMatha
just passed away. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the DMV there. Look at this. Yes, we have Lynn Bias, of course, KD, Quinn Cook. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Victor Oladipo. So I feel like the DMV, do you think we need to get more credit for being a place that produces ball players? And I'm talking both basketball and football.
Well, you know, and Adrian Dantley, I still don't think he really got his credit because he wasn't playing usually for great teams, but he was an extraordinary player. DeMatha won about 500 games in a row. You know, they were just extraordinary. I actually played basketball my sophomore year on the varsity team. I was 6'4.5". And I weighed about 155 pounds, so I got the crap beat out of me. But my name was Havlicek because I could run and I could shoot. I couldn't rebound much. But yeah, those were great athletes and that tradition there. But Kevin Durant, of all those people, Dave Bing. I think Dave Bing was from Baloo. I think a great athlete and great NBA star, maybe a little underappreciated too. But Kevin Durant, what I love about him, people joke about his, relationship with his mother. Shut up. You got a mother. Love, respect that woman, and he is a tough guy. He is incredibly articulate, humble, team player, incredible shot. I mean, he and Steph Curry and LeBron James, all three of those guys, Dwayne Wade, I mean, they handle their fame so well. They've never forgotten where they came from. They've never given up on that incredible work ethic. They're great teammates. They care about their teammates. Their ego's in check enough, but they've also got to have that ego to believe you can be the greatest. But Kevin Durant's extraordinary. And I look forward to following him, as he hopefully recovers from his injuries and, regains his dominance.
Nice. All right. We have one more question for you because you talked about DeMatha, so I knew it was coming. Best player from DeMatha.
Oh, well, Adrian Dantley, I've got to say that. I actually scored 29 points against their freshman team one year, but that was, when I was a freshman. I was not, once he would have killed me. So, but DeMatha and Adrian Dantley, absolutely. I mean, the guy was 6'5", 230, but just solid rock, maybe 240. Yeah. Great shooter. If he'd been with the Lakers or with the Bulls earlier in his career, it would have been fun to see him. You moved a little bit of time here and there. He would have been a nice addition to either of those teams, made them even more dominant.
Nice. And last question, Nick, before I let you go, you talked about the Bulls. We're talking basketball. I have to ask you your thoughts on the Last Dance documentary by ESPN.
I haven't seen it yet.
You're like the one person that hasn't, Nick.
I've been working at Vincent de Paul's homeless shelter and with some medical clinics to get these tests out because game right. This is the playing field right now. The fact that no homeless, I think we're the first city in America. I'm challenging Washington right now. Anybody listening right now, I think Phoenix is the first city in America to deliberately, intentionally honor and protect their most vulnerable population, the homeless, by getting them tests. The second thing is veterans we're working on, and first responders like the police, because they put themselves on the line. But the homeless population is completely forgotten. Finally, these prick tests that are on the FDA authorized, what's called emergency use authorization list, are being used. They take 10 minutes. I took one a couple of days ago. I was negative, thank God. And that's my work now. So I haven't been paying attention. Didn't have a chance to
That's
see.
a good reason. No, we want you to keep up that. That's good.
By the way, look what he did. He just made a huge contribution. He's becoming more of a philanthropist. And I think while that may not have been the case as much before, I think he will reap rewards. Maybe it's his marriage now, and he just feels that side of him's coming out, the legacy side. But I see that. I met him with shout out to one of my dearest friends, Michael Ray Wilbon, the man.
Yes.
The number one sports journalist in the country by far, in my opinion. Sorry, Tony Kornheiser. And he had a party at the NBA All-Star game when it was here in Phoenix. Yeah. And Michael was waxing eloquent about Dennis Rodman and those glory years. So he's a good man, but I think he's really found an even higher and better purpose now. Yeah. And I look for even more things from him in the future.
Nice. What a way to end. And really quick, one more fan question for you, Nick. Longest field goal you ever kicked?
I was the only kicker in NFL history with 3 over 57. I had 2 from 58, both at sea level. The one I mentioned earlier, which was against the Redskins in '83, which is the longest field goal in the first quarter in NFL history. Yep. Because usually they kick those field goals at the end of the game, like rest in peace, Tom Dempsey. And then in a practice, I kicked 69, 70 yards a couple of times. Had a nice wind behind me. Chief's awesome kicker. He kicked one about 76 yards a few weeks ago with a nice win. But those kicks, they don't matter in the end. It's about what you do in the games. Be consistent. Once again, don't celebrate. Act like you've been there. I'd hold up one arm. Now with the game winner, I'd be like that. Hey, I expected it. Make it happen and get ready.
I feel like this is what Justin Tucker is very famous for now. I love it. And of course, Nick, this was such a great show. I hate we have to wrap, but of course, I know everyone's getting ready for the NFL draft. And a fun thing for you, Nick, I just had Cornelius Green on my show. He's now at St. Albans on the teaching side. So very excited, of course, for y'all to have that St. Albans connect. But thank you for joining me.
Man, I told him how much I looked up to him at Ohio State and Dunbar. And Dunbar High School, and just a great athlete, a great personality. Give him my best. That's one of the examples of the great. Anybody listening in Washington, I don't care if you're coming from the poorest neighborhood in the world, you can be great if you learn to focus when you're tired and when you're bored. You can be Cornelius Green, you can be Adrian Dantley, you can be Kevin Durant, you might even be Nick Lowery.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Nick. And before I let you go, where can people follow and keep up with all the great stuff that you're doing?
Well, I'm at Lowery Nick on Instagram and on Twitter, and on Facebook, it's Nick the Kick, and nicklowery.org. If you need me to help with your team building, I'm pretty good at that. You can find me there, or at LowerySpeaks.com, LOWERY, LowerySpeaks.com. But I was just blessed to spend this hour with you. You're great.
I appreciate it.
And
thank you so much.
Look forward to seeing you in the future.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much. I can't wait to see you back again in person once the social distancing, of course, is over, because we're playing it safe. And for everyone listening, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next Thursday with a very special guest at 6 p.m. So stay tuned, and happy NFL Draft Day. I hope your team doesn't let you down. Thanks for joining me. Bye, guys.